The Ballad of Sticky Joe, written by Rich Pearson, read by the author. Laying in the depths of the amber liquid at the lowest reaches of his bottle, pickling himself more as each day went by, Sticky Joe reclined further and smiled his permanently sedated smile. He watched the people pass by and come back again, watched the light change through the amber as the sun rose and fell, as lanterns were lit and blown out again, and he smiled on. Sticky Joe was a silkworm, a living parasite that lay at the bottom of bottles of amber, his presence enriching the flavor of the drink for those who wanted some real taste in their beverage. "Hey," slurred Sticky Joe through the thick, viscous mass around him, as in a distorted form a wide-flanked wench trotted past the bar outside of his bottle. Everything to Sticky Joe was distorted, the convection of the bottle wall-eyeing everything he looked upon save for his own wrinkled, serpentine form. Sticky Joe had no arms. Sticky Joe had no legs or hands or fingers. Sticky Joe was, for all it mattered, just a face with a really, really long chin. He did, however, have a scarf and a hat, a short, floppy, tweed-looking thing that perched on his head and kept the heat from the lanterns off his eyes, even in his deepest stupor as he lay with his face pressed against the glass of the bottle, dribbling out into the drink around him. "Coochie-coo, mama," said Sticky Joe to the maiden so far away, in his sleepy, sluggish voice. The bartender didn't mind if Sticky Joe dribbled into the amber. He didn't mind if any of what Sticky Joe secreted got mixed into the drink, whether it came from the front or the back, whether it was sweat or tears, although tears were a rare thing for a silkworm. It was what he was in there for, to excrete his own bodily functions, which were almost always all amber anyway, and with a little of his own bile and blood mixed into the drink. Sticky Joe's presence in that one bottle of deep South malt added $4 onto the price of a shot and about 50 to the bottle. Not that Sticky Joe saw any of that. Not that Sticky Joe minded. Sticky Joe didn't mind at all. Sticky Joe lay in the bottom of the amber abyss as the eddies and rips of the swirling current flowed around him. Laying down there, it wasn't the same as laying in water or even swimming in it, like the swamp Sticky Joe could only just remember being born in. Sticky Joe could only just remember him and thousands of other silkworms like him spawning and crawling as larvae into the first light they had ever seen, their tiny microscopic eyes blinking 1,000,000 times a minute, trying so hard to adjust. Sticky Joe didn't like those memories. Sticky Joe hadn't liked being outside of the bottle. He'd been caught, for a given value of the word caught, by a kid who, as far as Sticky Joe was aware, was the bartender's spawn, who had brought Sticky Joe and a handful of his kin to be stored in a bath of water for a few days. Sticky Joe hadn't really liked the bath, which, despite being dirty, hadn't had anything living in it other than Sticky Joe and his kin, and nothing to eat or suck nutrients out of to keep him healthy. Thankfully, it hadn't been long before Sticky Joe had been plucked from the bath and dropped neatly into the strong, dark amber and stored down in the cellar for a long time. That, Sticky Joe had liked that. He could have stayed there forever and ever and ever. "Oh yeah," thought Sticky Joe with his eyes closed and an idiot smile on his thumbprint face, remembering that sweet, warm darkness. He didn't mind it out here on the bar shelf. Sticky Joe wouldn't have minded where you'd put his bottle at all. He would just have minded if you'd taken him out of it. Sticky Joe was about to have another thought when the bartender picked up the bottle of Southern malt with Sticky Joe in it and began pouring chasers for the men at the bar. Sticky Joe loved it when they served chasers. Short little shots that meant the bottle had to go up and down, up and down, up and down, time and again, himself just swirling around in that sweet amber mess, the clients looking on like they always did. "Look at the worm," they'd say. "Look at him swirl and twirl." Sticky Joe liked the swirling and the twirling. At the end of the bartender's round of chasers, Sticky Joe was almost the only thing left in the bottle, and the bartender set it down on the lower back bar and went to refill it from the big vat. The vat that was hidden under the bar was fed by a long length of hose that the bartender used to siphon the liquid up to the bottle or container he needed refilling, which meant the bartender taking a good long suck at the hose and himself getting a quick swig of the amber as it came up the line before he sloshed the hose into position over Sticky Joe's bottle. Sticky Joe never felt better. Sticky Joe sat there as 2 whole liters of clean, pure malt amber rolled over him, showering around him as he rose up, momentarily floating on the aerated liquid. The cork went back in, and the bottle was reset on the shelf. Sticky Joe hadn't always been a worm in a bottle. Even back before he'd been in the bottle, Sticky Joe remembered a time when he hadn't been a worm. He remembered it like someone might remember a dream, like some fleeting, fleeing, fading picture on a wall that showed an old landscape of a time long ago that didn't exist. Before Sticky Joe had been a worm in a bottle, he'd been a man sat at a bar, drinking himself into the bottom of that bottle. He'd been just another regular guy at the outpost with his stupid hat and his stupid scarf, and back then he'd worn more clothes over his body which had arms and legs even. Sticky Joe remembered that time in such a strange fashion. He remembered feeling good about himself at that time, feeling good about the way his life was in that backwater, broken down hellhole of a town, working down the pit all of every day and drinking himself to death every night. But Sticky Joe, the worm, remembered this and almost scoffed, or would have if he'd had the right kind of throat for it. Sticky Joe remembered a fool, the man he was, who was content with that poor life and that poor living, a man who was happy with how things had been. Not Sticky Joe now. No, sir. Now Sticky Joe lay back in his bottle of amber and shuddered to himself as he remembered the foolish man he had been. Just about the only thing he couldn't remember, or had maybe never tried to, was how he'd come to be this worm in a bottle, how he'd stopped being that man sat at the bar. As Sticky Joe thought of this, he looked out through his curved glass bottle at the warped world beyond it, and could make out a man sat slumped at the bar. A pit worker like he'd once been, chasing down glass after glass of the amber fluid. Sticky Joe looked at him and for the first time in a long time thought he could remember something new, like something that wasn't a part of his set of memories and recollections, but a whole new memory of the man he used to be. As Sticky Joe watched this man who was just like he used to be, he remembered how he hadn't always been so content with that life, how he'd got to a point of so many days without light, so many nights without a woman or man, and so much time without talking, like he'd just been fooling himself that all he needed was the amber and the work, the toil and the pay. Sticky Joe remembered how he, the man, had got so down with those thoughts, had got so lost in himself that he'd thought what a great idea it'd be to just be a worm in a bottle, to have such a small brain and such a small set of hopes that every day pickling in a bottle of amber would be all he had ever needed. Sticky Joe squinted out at the man as he held his glass up mutely for the bartender to refill, and tried to remember how he'd gone from being that man out there, or one just like it, to being this worm in this bottle. Sticky Joe remembered only being sat at that bar or working down the pit, neither memories giving him much of a clue at all. As Sticky Joe watched the man at the bar, the door to the saloon, way over to the right, opened up, and through his amber, Sticky Joe heard the sound of boots laden with spurs clunking across the hard wooden floors, and he could make out a darkened figure, not darkened particularly like in dress or appearance, but just like the light didn't want anything to do with him, who pulled up a stool at the bar next to Sticky Joe's pit worker and ordered a short of Sticky Joe's amber without saying a word. Sticky Joe tried to keep his eyes on the dark stranger as the bottle went up and down, but his blurred vision was bad enough without having to be tipped up and down whilst looking through a curved bottle. Back on the shelf as the amber swirled around him and settled, Sticky Joe could see the dark figure sipping his drink before resting his glass back on the bar top. Sticky Joe saw the pit worker look around and say something to the dark figure, who, as far as Sticky Joe could tell, didn't respond in any way. The bartender had moved away and was cleaning something at the other end of the bar. Only the 2 men stood in the saloon, and as far as Sticky Joe could tell by the light through the windows, it was about midway through the afternoon. As Sticky Joe looked back, he could see the darkened figure had broken his silence with the pit worker, and the 2 men were in shallow conversation. As Sticky Joe watched, a memory jutted back into his mind like a badly driven train might lurch into a station, and suddenly Sticky Joe was sat right where the pit worker was, in the pit worker's body, talking to the tall, dark man with the wide-brimmed hat and the skin covered in scars, and Sticky Joe was remembering their bargain. "It's not like you got much going for you out here," drawled the dark figure to Joe, who dumbly sat and tried to think about arguing. "I guess not," he replied. "And as far as I can see," drawled on the dark figure, "you ain't got nobody around here that's gonna miss you." Joe's lip trembled, and he felt sweat appear on his forehead, and all of a sudden felt pins and needles all over his body, making him shudder and involuntarily hold himself with both arms. The dark figure turned to him. "Ain't gonna hurt," said the dark figure. "Ain't even gonna feel like anything at all. Just gonna be like going to sleep and waking up again." Joe thought for a moment and looked back at his glass. Just a tiny bit of amber left in it, and then he thought about the worm in the bottle of amber behind the bar. He thought about what the man offered and what it might mean to be that silkworm, to be that carefree and calm. Next to him, a match flared. "Ignorance," said the dark man as he puffed on his cigarillo and inhaled rich blue smoke, "is bliss." "Huh?" asked Joe as he turned back, but the match was already flying towards him, tumbling through the air in slow motion. From within his bottle, Sticky Joe watched, and for the first time since he could remember being that silkworm, felt panic and fear and wanted to cry out, Don't do it!" And as he thought this, he realized he really had called out, and the dark figure had turned to look at him and had smiled that great big smile, the smile Joe the man could remember from when he made this bargain with the coal man, just like this pit worker had done now. Everything seemed to slow down and almost come to a stop as the match flew through the air, and the coal man spoke to the worm in the bottle. "Had your time, Sticky Joe," said the coal man, in a voice like tar drying in the sun. "Had your time and spent it well. Now it's time to go." "But he don't want to go," cried Sticky Joe, nodding furiously with his stupid worm body at the pit worker who sat frozen in time whilst the two conversed. "Yes, he do," said the coal man, puffing on the cigarillo again. "He just don't know it yet." Time sped back up to normal. Speed returned to the room. The match struck the pit worker gently in the chest like nothing more than a butterfly, and in the same moment, as the pit worker fell off his stool as dead as dirt in the desert, Sticky Joe blinked and wasn't Sticky Joe no more. The end. This was a recording of the Ballad of Sticky Joe, written and read by Rich Pearson, from the anthology Dark Red Lights.